Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video. Game week 1 is done. It was an absolutely crazy week. There are some absolutely massive scores out there and there are also some quite low scores if you didn't go for the likes of Bruno or Salah, if you missed one of them out, if you didn't have a West Ham attacker. So if you did have a low score, don't stress at all. Game week 1 is largely irrelevant by the end of the season. Now is when the real work begins, when we start making transfers. We start trying to nail those captaincy decisions when it's a little bit less obvious who to captain. So don't panic. But if you did have a good game week, if you scored over 100 points, congratulations. Today's video is going to be looking at midfielders to target ahead of game week 2 and beyond. Now, the main reason for that is there are a lot of transfers being used on midfielders. A lot of the top transfers out are for the likes of Pepe or Havertz because people took a game week 1 punt, or people are looking to move out James Maddison after his potential injury. We now know that Gundogan may potentially be injured. At the time of you watching this, you may already know that for certain one way or another. But with potential injuries, with potentially a lot of people having taken a punt in game week 1, a lot of people are going to be using their transfers in midfield this week. So what I thought I'd do is try and help to advise your decision making, show you who performed quite well, in my opinion, through eye test and statistics in game week 1, and advise who you should be considering ahead of game week 2. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. So, the player that we're going to be starting with is the man on the thumbnail, SAԻD BENRAHMA. If you watched my team selection video that I released on Thursday, you know that I was potentially discussing downgrading Raphinha to Benrahma and upgrading my bench. And that is the decision I ended up making. I ended up moving Raphinha to Benrahma, and obviously there was a huge point swing there. So potentially quite lucky on my behalf, because I think if I had the money, I probably would have just stuck with Raphinha because he's got proven quality last season in the Prem. Benrahma had a great pre-season, but obviously didn't perform very well in the Premier League last season. However, game week 1, he looked absolutely up for it, and he continued that form that we saw in pre-season. As you can see, expected FPL points of 7.82. He ended up pulling a 12-pointer, so he ended up outperforming his expected FPL points, which obviously happens quite often with a lot of variance in the statistics. But he got a goal and an assist. Non-penalty expected goals and expected assists of 0.88. So he's expected to be involved in roughly 1 goal in that game. So again, overperformed slightly, but that does happen across small sample sizes. And it's worth saying that if we're going to be looking at at data from just 1 game week, that's a very small sample size. We probably can't pull on too many trends from that. So it's nice to look at just to see how they perform, but I wouldn't start trying to identify too many things based on the small sample size. We'd really like at least sort of 5 to 10 game weeks before we start trying to look at trends. But the statistics were very good, obviously involved in a lot of what happened. You can see straight away from the touch map just to the right. So these little dots are every time that Benrahma's touched the ball. So he was very involved in the central areas, but he did drift out to the left a lot, which we know he loves to do. And he's also got quite a few touches in the box. So he was very, very involved in everything that happened. Now, the one thing that I would potentially worry about is there are now rumours starting again that Lingard does want to go back to West Ham, and West Ham are interested in signing Lingard, which we always thought would happen, but then it started to look like maybe he would stay at Manchester United. Benrahma played just behind Antonio in that sort of number 10 role in game week 1, and that is the role that Lingard would occupy. Now, what I would say is, looking at how well Benrahma does when he shifts out to the left, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Pablo Fornals that drops out and Benrahma shifts to the left and then Lingard plays in that 10 role. However, what I would say is we don't know that for certain. So Benrahma could be the one to miss out. I still think he's probably the number 1 target ahead of game week 2, just because the fixtures are fantastic. If you have a look, they've got Leicester, Crystal Palace, Southampton, United in 5 isn't great, but then Leeds and Brentford in 6 and 7. If Benrahma can nail down his place, and I don't see any reason why he can't, because he performed so well in pre-season and game week 1, then I do think he should be the number 1 target if you're looking for a midfielder. Obviously, only 6 million. There's potential he rises in price tonight, but I've just had a look at the price change statistics, and it does look more likely that he will rise in price tomorrow night, which would be Wednesday evening. That looks more likely, but he could go up in price tonight. So I would jump on that probably before Friday if you're going to make that move. I just think he links up very well with Antonio as well. We know Antonio's been singing his praises, and the sort of vibe I get is sort of Harry Kane and Son from last year, or perhaps more appropriately, it would be Callum Wilson and Fraser from Bournemouth days. You know, when they used to link up goals and assists. Benrahma assisted Antonio, then Antonio assisted Benrahma. So there's a really nice link up between the two of them. The statistics were good from game week 1. He performed well in pre-season. He's only 6 million. I do think that potentially the number one target for you guys looking to move out a midfielder should be SAԻD BENRAHMA. Now, if you did watch my team selection video, you'll know that I do own İlkay Gundogan, and therefore I am looking at potentially replacing him if he is injured. I'll discuss this in my team selection video, but I think if he is injured, I'll probably move him out. If we don't get news, I might be tempted to roll and just get another week's worth of information and then use my 2 free transfers to maybe restructure the team slightly. But because I already own Benrahma, I am looking at potential other replacements for Gundogan. And ISMAÍLA SARR is probably at the top of that list, or at least in the top 2 or 3 options for me. I heavily considered him throughout pre-season, and I know a lot of people use that in hindsight. Oh, I really considered that player, but he was in my differentials video earlier on in the season. And I just like the fact that he does appear to be a goal scorer. He gets goals, which is obviously what we want. He looks like he's still going to be on penalties when Troy Deeney isn't on the pitch, which might be a lot of the time. So I just really like the look of him. You can see the fixtures. The only thing that would put me off SAR potentially is his fixtures in 2 and 3 aren't great. We know that Brighton can defend well on their day. And we know that obviously Tottenham looked really, really solid against Manchester City. With Nuno in, perhaps there's a slight shift towards being a defensive counter-attacking team. So it wouldn't necessarily put me off of him, but the fixtures aren't great in 2 and 3. So I would keep an eye on that. As you can see from his stats in game week 1, they're not as good as Benrahma's, but the game just wasn't as open as that game at Newcastle. So 5.63 expected FPL points. That's obviously still fantastic. He grabbed a goal, no assists. And actually what's interesting is if you look at his expected data, his expected goals was only 0.13, and the goal was quite lucky to go in the end with the deflection, but his expected goal was 0.13. His expected assist was 0.24. So he was actually slightly more creative than he was a direct goal threat, which isn't in line with his past performances. Again, very, very small sample size, just looking at one game. He obviously tormented Target so much, if you didn't watch the game, that Target was pulled off at half-time. Now, it doesn't look like there was an injury. That was purely tactical by the looks of it. And SAR basically just tormented him repeatedly until he was brought off. What I would say is once Ashley Young come on the pitch, someone with a little bit more of maybe tactical prowess, someone that knows how to get inside the head of a winger and how to block them when they're making certain moves. SAR did struggle slightly more in the second half, and Ashley Young was able to basically nullify his threat quite well. So perhaps Target wasn't the best opponent to go against. We know he's quite slow, and SAR was basically just rinsing him every time he ran at him. If you look at the touch map, again, all of these blue dots are touches during the first game of the season for ISMAÍLA SARR. They're all very, very wide, and even his touches inside the box are right on the edge of the box. And now, that's not an issue. We know that he is a right winger, and he's going to basically occupy most of his space on the right wing, and he's going to cut in on that left foot. However, I would like to see him occupy some slightly more central areas, because apart from a few shots from outside the box or on the edge inside the box on that right, and maybe a few crosses, he's not going to be able to be much of a direct goal threat being that wide. Now, again, it's one game. That might have just been the way that the Villa game went. It might be that come game week 2 and come game week 3 against Brighton and Tottenham, he starts to drift more centrally. But for me, I would have liked to see more touches in the box, but also centrally and just on the edge of the box as well. So that is something I'm looking at. With the fixtures against Brighton and Tottenham, with a lot of these touches and a lot of his involvement being quite wide, and with Ashley Young showing that potentially some of the more adept left-backs might be able to nullify his threat, I'm potentially looking at other players ahead of SAR, but at 6 million, getting a goal in the first game week, potentially being on penalties, and the fixtures from game week 4 being very, very nice, he is still on my watch list. Now, the third player we're looking at today is the most expensive player on the list, and that is Mason Greenwood. Now, the reason I've included him is for those people that are potentially looking to move out İlkay Gundogan if he's injured, or potentially if you started with the likes of Pepe, Havertz, and you want to move them out for this game week. So I like Mason Greenwood. I'll be honest, at the time of recording this, he is top of the list for me for replacements if İlkay Gundogan is confirmed as being injured. So I'm definitely got a keen eye on him. I discussed him throughout pre-season. I really like the look of him. The only thing that put me off going for him in game week 1 is Martial's fitness. He looked really fit in pre-season. He looked hungry. I thought there was a relatively high chance that Martial started game week 1. I thought Greenwood would definitely start game week 1, but I didn't anticipate that all of the other players would be slightly further behind on their fitness. I thought Martial would be back quicker. I thought Cavani would be back a little bit quicker as well. So at the time of recording this, I do believe that Greenwood's almost nailed to start game week 2, probably game week 3 as well. After the international break, no one knows. But those fixtures in 2 and 3 against Southampton and Wolves are great fixtures, and Greenwood just looked brilliant. Now, what I would say is Greenwood massively passed the eye test. I think anyone that watched that game against Leeds said Greenwood had a brilliant performance. He looked really, really good. He looked like he was a natural forward, which he struggled with in the past because, yes, he's a forward, but a lot of the time he performs better coming off that right. But he looked like a natural number 9. His hold-up play was absolutely excellent. And if you just have a glance at the touch map, that's what you can see there. A lot of his touches are very, very central, but they're all quite maybe 25, 30 yards away from the goal. His hold-up play was brilliant. He was dropping deep to receive the ball. He was quite creative. And that is backed up in the stats. If you have a look at his expected assists, they were 0.25, and his expected goal was 0.11. So obviously we know how brilliant his finishing was. His finish was absolutely excellent, but it wasn't a great opportunity, and you're not going to score those every single time, even if you have got the great finishing that Mason Greenwood does have. So he passed the eye test, but not necessarily a direct goal threat a lot. But again, that might just be the way the Leeds game went. I expect Man United to dominate Southampton even more than they did so with Leeds. So potentially he'll be closer to the box if he starts in that 9 role again. And if he does shift out to the right, Sancho on the left and Cavani up top potentially in the coming game weeks, I think he's probably even more of a direct goal threat because, like I said, he sort of comes in off that right, cuts into the box, and he gets off a few good shots. So I do really like Greenwood. I would just be keeping up. Obviously, if I bring him in, then I can't do this. But if you're not bringing him in this week and you're looking for future weeks, just keep an eye on him again. See if he's dropping deep again. See if he's getting in and around the box. Because in game week 1, he only had 2 touches inside the box. And one of those was obviously his goal. We know he's a clinical finisher, but I would like to see him get into the box a little bit more because that would obviously push him from being a great option to one of the very best. So definitely at the top of my personal watch list to replace Ilkay Gundogan, but definitely worth keeping an eye on his positioning. Now, I think a lot of us are looking to find funds to upgrade. If we went without Bruno or Son, I think a lot of us are trying to find ways to get Bruno and Son in or potentially upgrade to having a third striker. So I've included here a budget option and someone that you could potentially downgrade one of your midfielders to find funds elsewhere, and that is BRYAN MBEUMO. Now, the statistics aren't necessarily fantastic for his first game that he played on Friday evening against Arsenal, but he did perform really well. And again, it might potentially be something that's more of an eye test than the statistics, but he looked very lively, which is a word that's passed around the community as a bit of a joke, but he looked very, very lively. His positioning was really, really interesting. So they did play with 2 up top, so we weren't sure whether MBEUMO was going to play on like the right wing or up top with Tony. It does look like they're going to opt for 2 up top, so I like that. He's basically a 5.5 million out of position player. So at only 1.2%, he could be a really, really nice differential. If you just glance towards the touch map again, he is getting inside the box and he is occupying some central areas. He didn't touch the ball a massive amount, and that is mainly because obviously they played against Arsenal and not every fixture is going to be that difficult, even though they did win. So they might hold the ball a little bit more in some other games. But I just like the positionings he's taken up. I like the fact that he's out of position. He's saving £1 million on Tony. And I know Tony's the better option and he's on penalties. But if you don't want to go for Tony and you've got that midfield spot and you still want a Brentford player, I do really like MBEUMO. As I said, his statistics weren't great. Expected FPL points of 3.34. Expected goals of 0.13 and expected assists of 0.08. So the statistics don't really back it up, but he did look very good. He was occupying some great positions. And one of the main reasons that I've suggested him is the next 4 fixtures are very, very nice. Crystal Palace away, you could easily see him getting an attacking return there. Aston Villa looked really, really shaky against Watford. Brighton at home's not an easy fixture, but I certainly wouldn't put it past Brentford to score there. And Wolves away, again, Wolves looked quite sturdy against Leicester, but it's not a difficult fixture particularly. And then you'd probably look at either benching him in 6 and 7 or moving him on after that. But I really liked him. I wanted to include a slightly cheaper option because, again, a lot of people are looking to downgrade so that they can spread the funds elsewhere or upgrade to the likes of Son and Bruno. So if you're looking for a cheaper option, I think MBEUMO looks fantastic. And I'm certainly considering him to go from Gundogan to MBEUMO to then have 2 million to play with elsewhere. So definitely a great option for game week 2. Now, the fifth and final option is a massive punt in the form of Steven Bergwijn, and it might be a slightly knee-jerky punt at that as well, based on the game at the weekend. However, let me explain why. I mean, the first reason to say that it's a punt isn't because of his statistics or his price or his pedigree. It's more to do with the fact that if Kane does stay at Tottenham and he comes back fairly soon, Kane will then obviously go up top. Son will shift out to the left, and the left wing is where Steven Bergwijn played against Manchester City. Now, there is a small chance that Bergwijn shifts out to the right wing, but he's not much of a right winger. And I do think that Lucas Moura is above Bergwijn in the pecking order. So if Kane comes back and stays at Spurs, it is probably going to be Bergwijn that drops out. That being said, he's a fantastic option at 6 million, a massive differential with less than 1% owning him at the time of recording. And the fixtures are very, very good with Wolves away and Watford at home. I think Bergwijn's an even better option if you're confident that you're going to play an early wildcard. If you're looking at wildcard in between game week 3 and 4, I think Wolves and Watford are two great fixtures. And I do think that Bergwijn should potentially be nailed for those two unless Kane suddenly just comes back flying for Spurs. But I do really like him. Again, a massive punt, I know. The statistics are actually quite good for him. And again, it's weird because they're basically reversed. So he got no goals and he got the assist, but the statistics suggested that he was actually more of a direct goal threat than he was a creative force. So his expected goals are 0.46, which is relatively high, and expected assists of 0.16. So he was very, very involved in the action, and I think the game suited Spurs and the likes of Lucas Moura and Bergwijn playing on the counter-attack. You can see by his touch map, they're fairly spread out. He wasn't very involved directly in the box, but he did still have 3 touches in the box, which is pretty impressive. So I'm not going to speak too much on him. I just think he's a really good option if you're very high in your risk-taking. I've spoken about it in my book as well. We should play to the profile of who we are. And if you don't like the likes of Sarr and Mbeumo and Benrahma, or you already have 2 or 3 of them, and you want a really big risk for game week 2 or 3, I would look at Steven Bergwijn. What I would say is keep an eye on the press conferences. If Harry Kane is confirmed to be playing in game week 2 for Tottenham, and if he looks like he's definitely going to start, I wouldn't be going for Steven Bergwijn just because I think he'll be the one that might miss out. Or you could potentially just go for Lucas Moura, but of course he's more expensive. So something to keep an eye on. Spurs did look quite impressive, but I think the game suited them playing on the counter-attack. I think against Wolves and Watford, they'll drop a little bit deeper and it'll be up to them to be more creative. So just a fifth and final punt there, something a bit different for you to consider, but definitely keep an eye on the press conferences because it might be that he doesn't start game week 2 if Kane is back. So guys, there you have it. Those are my top 5 players that I think you should target ahead of game week 2 and beyond. There are obviously some players that I haven't included here for numerous reasons. Potentially the likes of Harrison and Rafinha might be worth jumping on. Yes, they do play Liverpool in game week 4, and Everton in game week 2 isn't necessarily the easiest fixture, but you can hold them long term. I've obviously only got space to include a few people in this, so I haven't included them just because their immediate fixtures aren't that great, and they did look quite poor against Manchester United, although that is only 1 game week. So there are the 2 Leeds boys as well. I did really like the look of Adama Traore. I was going to include him here, but the fixtures just really aren't great over the next few. From game week 4 onwards, Adama Traore may be a great option. So there are some other options around these 5 players. I'm not saying these are the only 5 you should consider, but these are the 5 that potentially turned my head in game week 1, and I think we should potentially be considering ahead of game week 2. Thank you very much for watching today's video. I will be coming to you with sort of a game week review and team selection video, potentially tomorrow on Wednesday, potentially also Thursday as well. And that'll basically be my team for the upcoming game week. And I'll have a little bit of a chat about how game week 1 went for myself and what transfers I am considering ahead of game week 2. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe. Turn on the notifications if you do like to know when my videos go live. And I'll catch you all in the next one, guys. Thank you very much. Bye.